Welcome to the Jigsaw session, Understanding Your Child's Sensory Needs. Occupational therapy, known as OT, supports a child or young person to develop their independence in daily activities and maximise their potential. We support young people to engage in the things they need and want to do. The main occupations for a child are play and leisure, self-care, including sleep, and participating in nursery or school. In this presentation, we will be covering the senses, sensory processing, what we do with sensory information, sensory modulation, and sensory difficulties and strategies. Firstly, we are going to consider each of the senses. It's likely you'll be aware of some of the senses that we have listed, but we'll explore them in a little more detail. If you'd like further information, we encourage you to look on the RISE website and access the Neurodevelopmental tab, where you'll find a presentation entitled Supporting Sensory Difficulties. This will provide detail around each sense and how they impact on daily living. On the left of the slide, you'll find the higher senses listed, which relate to the senses we use daily and tell us what's happening around us. First, we have vision, which allows us to navigate our way around things, see where things are, help us recognise danger, and avoid falling over something within our vicinity. Vision is one of our most used senses. The next listed is hearing. We use this sense to alert ourselves to know what's happening in the room and to know when our name's being called. At times we might be sensitive to certain sounds and struggle to tolerate hearing everything that's happening around us. The final higher senses are taste and smell, which are closely linked. Both senses allow us to recognise danger, for example, if something is burning or if there's an unfamiliar smell. We have lots of taste buds on our tongue which help us identify flavours we like or dislike, but also tell us if something tastes unusual or may be out of date. These two senses are where we notice some difficulties with children with autism. On the right-hand side, we have the unconscious senses. These give us all the information we need to know exactly what our body is doing all the time. We'll explore these in more detail in the next few slides. The tactile sense of touch can be divided into two pathways. The protective pathway relates to our ability to recognise pain, light touch and temperature. It's extremely important for keeping us safe, so if you were to touch a hot pan, the brain will immediately acknowledge the feeling of pain. As a result, the brain will make the body move your hand away to protect yourself. If this system isn't working properly and you're not recognising that something is hot, this can put you at risk. The discriminative pathway allows us to recognise different textures and shapes, which becomes particularly helpful if we're trying to find an item in a busy bag without relying on our vision. If we think about our previous example with the hot pan, following this event, the brain will send extra sensory information from the discriminatory touch pathway to provide more information, such as where the pain is and how it feels. In the forthcoming slides, we will discuss how a child may present if their tactile sense is not working properly. The next sense we're going to explore is the proprioceptive sense. This is about knowing where our body is in space. It's our internal body awareness, allowing us to touch our nose with our index finger while keeping our eyes closed and not relying on vision. It's important for activities such as dressing, as for example, we need to know where our arm is when putting on a jumper. This sense also enables us to coordinate our movements smoothly and helps us understand how much force is needed for a task such as handwriting. If a child is pressing too hard on the paper, it's likely they're needing more feedback to know what they're doing and how they're writing. It's not uncommon to see difficulties in these areas for our children with neurodevelopmental disorders. During this presentation, we will discuss strategies, and this is where the heavy work activities are often included to provide feedback to the child and help them develop their body awareness and confidence during movement activities. The last sense is vestibular. This is related to balance. It's sometimes termed as an internal spirit level. It helps us know where our body and head is in space. It helps us know what direction we're moving in, for instance, whether we're moving forwards or backwards, or whether we're bending over. It's also related to gravity. Some children are fearful of movement, especially when their feet are coming off the ground, and we often see high levels of anxiety because they don't know where their body is. Alternatively, some children seek this movement and may be observed to spin and enjoy being upside down. So what is sensory processing? Sensory processing is about taking in all the information that is around us and identifying what we need to be alert to and what we need to respond to. We are absorbing sensory information constantly, so it's important that we have a system of finding what's important. By doing this, we can focus on a specific task and respond to sensory input in the most appropriate way. For example, while listening to this presentation, you might be mindful of sensory information around you, such as the birds outside, cars driving past, other family members in the household, uncomfortable clothing. But while listening to this, you're able to filter out what's happening around you and recognise it's not important to this activity. In turn, it helps us organise ourselves appropriately. We only use 5% of the sensory information our body is provided with and filter out the other 95%. If you're struggling to filter out sensory information and letting in more than 5%, then there are different problems that may occur. This process is called modulation. Sensory modulation facilitates a calm and alert state window in which our ability to function is maximised. We all have different arousal levels, from the couch potato to the human dynamo, and we all use sensory input to bring ourselves up or down to where we are calm and alert. Children with ASD sometimes find it difficult to get themselves to a calm, alert state in order to participate in an activity. A child's sensory difficulties can also impact on their ability to tolerate certain activities of daily living. Think of the different activities you might do to wake yourself up. You might stretch, have a cup of coffee, go for a walk, or listen to stimulating music. To calm yourself down, you might have a bath, listen to relaxing music, or have a milky drink. We all have strategies that enable us to concentrate, such as taking notes, biting a pen lid, chewing gum, doodling, or foot tapping. It's different for each person, and something that one person finds calming can be stimulating to someone else. So why is being able to self-regulate important for managing anxiety and sensory overload? If our arousal levels are too high, it's more likely to trigger a stress response. This is a natural, uncontrollable response that keeps us alert and helps us protect ourselves. For children with ASD, their anxiety baseline is going to be higher than other people's because they are on a high alert a lot of the time. Sometimes this anxiety can become so overwhelming that it triggers the fight or flight response. In these circumstances, a child can become aggressive, extremely distressed, or sometimes even violent. Or they may have the opposite response and simply shut down, disengage completely, or remove themselves from the situation. This can particularly impact daily activities such as self-care, meal times, and school. It's important that we are aware of this so that we can identify appropriate strategies and build awareness for the people around them. Sensory processing difficulties occur when the brain struggles to organise and respond to information that comes in through the senses. It can cause difficulties in responding and adapting to everyday situations. Children with sensory processing difficulties may have a hard time figuring out what's going on inside and outside their bodies. For instance, a child in preschool may feel that the drawings and pictures on the walls are constantly distracting them, as the brain hasn't registered that they've seen them before. Or they may be on high alert when other children are around, just in case someone brushes past them and hurts them. Older children may struggle to get their socks on in the morning, as they find balancing difficult and struggle to coordinate their upper and lower limbs accordingly. Most people adapt to their sensory preferences and make choices that suit their needs. However, children can struggle to understand their difficulties and communicate their preferences, making it extremely difficult to make sense of the world and formulating the most appropriate response to sensory input. This can contribute towards modulation difficulties. For instance, a child may be over-responsive to input, and you may observe them covering their ears at noises that most people can tolerate, becoming upset or distressed, complaining of pain when lightly touched or hugged, struggling to sleep at night, or having an almost uncontrollable need to move around and fidget. Under-responsive can present as not responding to pain, not noticing when their name has been called, and preferring sedentary activities. They may also be passive and quiet, or described as daydreamers. Sensory processing difficulties can also contribute towards having poor body awareness, which we discussed earlier in relation to proprioception. This includes having poor registration and or discrimination, difficulties with motor planning and difficulties with motor skills. In these circumstances, children can struggle to organise their bodies and prepare for a motor task. They may appear very clumsy and uncoordinated. They might be heavy-footed and struggle to recognise what force to use for each activity. They might chew on non-food items more often. At times, children may avoid motor tasks as they are too challenging, and they may be perceived as lazy. When we're thinking about sensory strategies, we're aiming for the just right combination of sensory input to achieve that calm and alert state and maximise our ability to perform. Deep pressure, vestibular and proprioceptive systems are natural calmers and organisers for the body, and as discussed before, we all use these systems to help us modulate our arousal level in very discrete and individual ways, for example chewing a pen, tapping a foot, rubbing our forehead, etc. When identifying sensory strategies, it's important to remember that we're aiming for timed and carefully selected sensory activities throughout the day and week, opposed to responding when things become overwhelming or once your child has reached the fight or flight response. This helps the child maintain their arousal and emotions throughout the day and avoids a build-up. It's helpful to view it as a way of life opposed to a short-term fix, and ensure it becomes a part of the daily routine, as consistency is key. Sensory-based activities are the most effective when they're incorporated into daily life and are meaningful to the individual. Sometimes it can be helpful to involve the child in planning their routine, as they might recognise or be able to share what keeps them motivated. So how can you help your child? First, it's important to analyse their participation in different activities and review the environment to identify what could be interfering with function. This may mean experimenting. It could be that they have a strong response to certain smells in the home environment, specific meals being cooked, perfumes, laundry detergent. They may struggle to tolerate certain noises inside or outside the home, for example the waste collectors. Or they could be struggling to fall asleep or waking excessively during the night. A diary can be helpful to identify who's around, what's happening, and how the child is responding, to identify any patterns or trends. Attempt to make environmental modifications that may benefit the child. For instance, if they're struggling to get to sleep at night, try removing any visual stimuli, i.e. posters on the walls, covering toys at night, painting the walls with neutral colours. You may also want to develop a calm area where they can go if they are feeling overwhelmed or appear distressed. This could include a quiet space in the house or in their bedroom. If suitable, it can be made to be more enclosed using sheets and cushions. You may also want to include scents they enjoy, music they find relaxing, and soft toys they can play with. Also consider the lighting within the house and potentially avoid fluorescent lighting. The important thing is to keep experimenting and trying new things using some of the strategies we'll discuss in further slides. Also talk to your child so they can begin to develop an understanding of their own needs and difficulties. This will allow you to work collaboratively. The final way you can help is by teaching strategies for self-regulation. This could include deep breathing exercises, providing visual or written information, depending on age and capabilities, teaching social expectations and skills, involving them in simple decisions that may only include two choices, or helping them identify and name their feelings. This can be done through naming our own feelings. For example, I feel annoyed today because I forgot to get milk while I was out food shopping, or using visual cards to identify their feelings, such as a sad face, angry face, happy face, etc. Now we'll move on to thinking about the tactile sense. If a child's tactile processing is not working properly, they may present as being over-responsive or sensitive to touch. This can present as withdrawing or disliking cuddles, avoiding messy play or becoming distressed if forced into it, appearing easily ticklish beyond that of their age-matched peers, feeling upset when hands or face are messy, avoiding using their fingers to feed themselves. They may present as a deer in the headlights or extremely anxious a lot of the time. They may respond negatively to being touched, especially if this is unexpected. Toothbrushing may be a real difficulty. They appear to overreact when hurt in the playground. Children may also be extremely fussy eaters due to disliking the texture of many foods. They may walk on tiptoes on certain surfaces. Nappy changing may be distressing for them. They may dislike or have a fear of going out in the wind or rain. Other children may seek out touch to control their environment and gather more feedback. This type of presentation is often termed tactile defensive. There are ways to reduce the anxiety your child is experiencing and make life more manageable for them if they present as oversensitive to touch. Strategies you could try include: use a no-pressure approach and allow the child to watch from a distance when their peers are participating in touch-related games. Have a conversation with nursery or school about how to minimise the risk of being jostled and bumped by others. Experiment with touch. For instance, offer a firmer hug opposed to a light hug, or vice versa. Use objects opposed to skin-to-skin contact. For example, roll a ball over their hand or body. Also, offer tools for certain activities instead of relying on them using their hands. Heavy work activities, such as anything that involves pulling, pushing, jumping, hanging, etc., can naturally help calm down the central nervous system and make us feel more relaxed. A trip to the park during the day, swimming, or even household tasks such as putting away the food shopping and moving laundry up and down the stairs are examples of heavy work activities. Offer deep pressure activities such as pressing down on their shoulders, rolling a therapy ball over them firmly, creating a sandwich game where you squish them with sofa cushions or wrapping them tightly in sheets. As previously stated, deep pressure helps us to feel calm and can support the child to engage in activities they find more difficult. Children who are over-responsive are likely to respond negatively if they can't anticipate your touch. Therefore, always approach them from the front or give them a warning that you're going to touch them. Use of calming toys or fidget toys when out in the community or at school. There's a variety of these on the market, therefore it's important to find the best ones for your child. Pre-warn your child around any self-care tasks, or use a visual timetable so they can anticipate and plan when these tasks will take place. Providing deep pressure activities before self-care can help relax them and desensitize the areas of the body that are more sensitive. For instance, apply pressure to the scalp and face before hair washing or teeth brushing. Get your child to sit down during activities so they can get additional sensory input from the surface underneath them, and support them to use a mirror during self-care tasks so they can anticipate touch. Be mindful that your child may be sensitive to certain fabrics, and textures. Trial different types of clothes to identify what they feel most comfortable in. Some children prefer to wear a lycra base layer to act as a second skin and a barrier between other clothing and the outside world. Also offer clothing-free times at home, such as after a bath or in bed. Take a graded approach to introducing messy play activities to your child. Begin by engaging them in heavy work activities to help them feel calmer, and then introduce them to different textures and activities gradually. Begin with activities where direct touch is not involved, for example, painting with Barbie's feet or running a toy car through paint. Move on to activities such as Play-Doh, water-based activities and sand, before gradually introducing more challenging textures such as paint. Whilst trying these activities, always aim for a calm, quiet and encouraging environment and approach. If the child finds nappy changing difficult, ensure the surface beneath them isn't too cool and place a towel underneath. Determine if the child prefers firm or light touch and use single quick movements. Also, team the activity with something positive, such as a familiar song or toy. If the child dislikes going out in the wind or rain, take a step-by-step approach and talk them through the plan so they anticipate what will happen next. For example, put hat and gloves on, walk to car, put car heater on. Provide visual information or cue cards to support the child if needed. Providing the child with a comforter can also sometimes help. Another way a child may present if their tactile process is not working properly is by being under-responsive to touch. This can present as having a messy face or hands but not seeming to notice. Touch may go unnoticed, leaving clothes twisted on their bodies without seeming to notice, needing to be wrapped up tight or wraps themselves in blankets while at home, having difficulties manipulating objects with their hands, including pencils, scissors, Lego, buttons and zips. Difficulties registering where they've been touched or orienting to touch unless it's of an intense nature. They may have poor tactile discrimination. This is the ability to recognise different shapes and textures. Their reactions may be slow or delayed to tactile input. Some children who are under-responsive to touch may seek out excessive amounts of tactile input. This is often the children who have a hard time keeping their hands to themselves. They may touch their faces excessively and touch people, animals or items in the environment to the point of annoyance. We often call this sensory seeking. Some children may mouth non-food objects more often than their peers. They may use their hands to explore the environment opposed to their eyes. And the child may enjoy squeezing, prodding and poking people or items, or receiving this type of touch themselves. To support the child that's under-responsive to touch, try the following strategies. Initially, begin by helping the child to become more alert. This is appropriate for the sensory-seeking child or the slow-to-get-going child. Try incorporating heavy work activities such as running, jumping, hopping, climbing, performing animal walks, or even helping with household chores such as mopping and wiping. Also, prepare the hands for tactile experiences by supporting the child to squeeze different stress balls and fidget tools, play with therapeutic or stretch a resistance band. Provide opportunities to experience activities that include increased feeling through the skin, for example, a Duplo activity where the child must find the pieces in a box of Duplo. Try integrating different activities in their play, for instance, messy play with non-food and food items, depending on what the child can tolerate. As discussed previously, grade this activity to support engagement. Having access to a feelie box which might contain a variety of textures, such as something soft, squishy, spiky, hard, etc. Have this easily available so the child can be redirected to it if they're continually touching items, or as a visual prompt if they're avoidant of touch. Play games like What's in the Bag and hide everyday items that the child must identify based on the feel of them. This, of course, should be based on their age and cognitive ability. Finger painting, using Play-Doh, creating and playing with finger puppets, creative activities using glue, clay, feathers and different textures. For children who walk on their tiptoes, offer them a foot massage to desensitise the area and encourage activities such as painting with feet or walking around barefoot at a soft play or on sand. This diagram shows the calm alert window we discussed earlier in relation to touch processing and how a person may present if over-aroused, under-aroused, or in that just right calm alert window. The strategies we have discussed should hopefully prepare a child for tactile experiences, but remember to take a graded approach to avoid the child becoming overwhelmed and disengaged. Some children can have difficulty with discrimination of sound, meaning they can't control what comes into the body. You may observe that your child puts their hands over their ears when the noise levels rise or there's noise they dislike. Refuse to enter a room if they hear a noise they don't like, for example the hoover or a hand dryer. Overreacts to sounds that others barely notice, or can't stop noticing a noise in the background, for example a fan, which makes it difficult for them to attend to a task. It's important to respect the individual's sensitivity to sound. It can actually hurt and be quite painful. Try to forewarn your child of any loud noises if possible, and try to minimise the auditory distractions. A room with a rug or carpet would help decrease extraneous noises. Consider the use of earplugs or headphones when there is expected to be excess noise in the room or when out and about. Noise cancelling headphones are also available and are known as ear defenders. Some individuals may benefit from wearing headphones during meal times if, say, for example, they are sat in a large room, such as a school hall, so that they can concentrate on one conversation at a time rather than additional noises in the room. Before giving an instruction to a child, always say their name first. It will help them to tune into you. No matter what the sensory difficulty is, you can't always control what happens in the environment around you. For example, when you go outside, you can't control who is going to brush past, who's going to create a loud noise. If you're in a high state of arousal, stress levels can increase and you can become more sensitive to certain sensory stimuli. It's beneficial, therefore, to consider preventative measures or strategies to reduce stress levels. Do things every day with your child to help keep them in that calm, alert window. Then whatever happens will happen, but they will be less likely to have a meltdown. Children and adults can sometimes find it hard to articulate their needs, and so it's important to engage them in activities that keep them in that just right zone. Consider using items to help control the sensory input to the body, for example, wearing earphones or headphones, use of weighted items and backpacks and fidget toys. However, at the core of all this is to do activities every day that are more active and keep the individual in that just right zone. Children who are under responsive to auditory information often speak in a loud voice, usually because they can't discriminate how loud they are, and they haven't got their own volume control. One of the things to understand with auditory information is that it can be harder to tolerate when it's coming into your own system. For example, when you are sat in the cinema, someone can be unwrapping a sweet and the sound can be really annoying. However, you can tolerate the sound when you are making it because it is self-generated. If we are not in control of the sound, it's a lot harder to tolerate, and that's even for people who don't experience sensory difficulties. For example, as a parent, you may be watching television and the volume is not that loud, but your child reports it is too loud. However, when they watch their own programme, they turn the volume up loud. Again, it's because they are in control of the volume. It's their choice, their selection. Some children who are sensitive to noises may hum to themselves, grind their teeth, or make a noise, and they do this to block out the noise they don't like. Again, if the child is in control, then they are able to block out the noise coming into their ears. Even if it is a loud noise they make, it's their own noise. Here are some tips on how you can support your child. Only speak to the child when they are facing you and looking at you. Provide simple instructions and not too many instructions. Make sure they are tuning into you before giving the instruction. Speak loudly and clearly. Start with one instruction and increase. Wait for the child to process the information and respond. Think about the environment in which the child is working. Reduce background noise. Reduce extraneous noise or wait until it has gone before giving instructions. Use visual cues to help. Use simple, expressive sentences. This diagram shows the calm alert window in relation to auditory processing and how a person may present if over-aroused, under-aroused, or in that just right calm alert window. The strategies we have discussed should hopefully prepare a child for auditory experiences, but remember to take a graded approach to avoid the child becoming overwhelmed and disengaged. Children with proprioceptive difficulties can't grade how much force they place through something. It's too much or too little. They just can't quite get how much force they need to apply. So they may easily break things, such as pens, and they may also struggle with coordination. For example, when learning to ride a bike, children can be so busy looking at their feet, to see where the feet are and what the feet are doing, that they can't look where they are going at the same time. Some children also find it difficult to throw and catch a ball. They will either throw the ball so hard as to make a hole in the wall, or they can't quite throw the ball hard enough. The feedback loop between the brain saying a little bit less, a little bit more to the body is not quite working as well as it should. Some children can appear to have weak arms and legs. To explain, there is a difference between strength and stability. A lot of children can hit or kick an object really hard, but if they are asked to hold their arm out to the side for any length of time, they start to drop the arm. So strength is seen as quite quick, whereas stability requires sustained co-contraction of the muscles. Children with proprioception difficulties struggle to stabilise the joints. So they are the children who tend to lean or prop their bodies against something or someone. They can't stand in a queue for very long and can't stand still. Often these children have flexible or really bendy joints due to their muscle tone. If our resting muscle tone is a bit soft, it would keep allowing us to bend our joints further. But if it is a bit more normal, it would say, OK, stop, and not push the joint further. So we know if you have low muscle tone that you will have potential problems with coordination, knowing where our bodies begin and end, and calibrating the force. Proprioception has this wonderful way of getting us feeling just right. So if you are not processing that information very well, there is every chance that you are not feeling quite regulated. Your nervous system requires that proprioceptive input, so sometimes these children will chew on things such as sleeves or shirt collars or jumpers or pens. When you chew, you are either trying to seek out proprioception because your body has no idea where it is, and so it is saying, I need to know, just give me something. Or you are trying to get yourself regulated, trying to calm yourself down, trying to get yourself in that calm, alert state. These children are fidgets because they often have bendy joints. They can't sit still and don't have the stability to maintain that sitting position. Movement of the body will provide the proprioceptive input that they are seeking, which helps them to know where their body parts are in relation to the environment, for example, sitting on a chair. They can appear to bump into people and objects, but not intentionally, and can be inattentive as they have to concentrate so hard on their body position. So, in terms of advice for these children, they absolutely need to engage in heavy work activities to the muscles and joints. They also need support with their posture, their core stability. An occupational therapist will assess a child's core stability as your balance comes from the ankles, knees, hips and the core, which includes your back and stomach muscles. If you're bendy, a lot of these children are flat-footed and have really flexible hips and don't crawl as a baby. The chances are standing on one leg is going to be super hard. Working on the development of their core stability can improve a child's balance. We have two types of balance, standing balance and balance on the move. Often these children are better when they are on the move. They are better balanced because their muscles are constantly changing, whereas a standing balance is just too hard for them. This is when they tend to be more on the go, because they don't have the stability to stand still, and they don't have the feedback to their brain to know where they, or their body parts, are. So these children need activities such as push, pull, tug of war, anything that is really heavy work to the muscles and joints. Equipment can help to provide proprioceptive input to the body, such as weighted backpacks, lap pads, scented heated lavender bags that you can place on the back of the neck, sit-fit cushions, which are air-filled cushions that you sit on and gives constant movement and constant feedback to the brain. Children with a vestibular under responsiveness can have either a really high threshold for movement, so they really seek out movement, or they have discrimination problems. Children that seek out movement are the risk takers. They don't tend to have an awareness of danger. These children need close supervision as they may often take risks. Of course, this could be identified through other diagnoses. For example, people with ADHD are very impulsive, don't have an awareness of danger, and they typically show signs of sensory seeking in terms of movement. Children with a vestibular under responsiveness really like to fall. You might find that children fall over on purpose, or they like to jump onto things, or crash onto the floor, or do things that provide a lot of sensory input to the body. These children typically like the fall rather than the crash at the end. Some children really enjoy watching TV upside down on the sofa, as this provides quite intense vestibular input. Remember, your vestibular and visual systems are really closely linked, so they're getting lots of sensory input in this position, and they really like it. Some children will spin or rock themselves. Any kind of stimulation to the vestibular system is clearly saying, I need something, I need more movement. These are the children who find it difficult to sit still to eat their dinner, often getting up as they say they need the toilet, even though they might have just been. It is any excuse to get up and move around a little bit more. Some children prefer to stand up to do their homework rather than sitting down. Discrimination difficulties in children is more about the child's vestibular system being very good at recognising their position, which way they are falling, and also their equilibrium reaction, their balance mechanisms. For example, if I move my position that way or that way, I can keep myself balanced. These children often have poor back muscles, so they are quite slumped in their positions. When you have poor core muscles or poor position, the function of the hand-wrist, for example, is not as good as it could be. It's a bit like a crane. You have to be really stable at the core, which is your tummy, hips and waist, and in the shoulders, to have good function in terms of writing and other fine motor skills. PE lessons at school can also be challenging if you have poor balance skills. So these children do need movement, but remember that an item such as a trampoline is not always calming. For some children it is, because if a child doesn't have a vestibular problem, they can modulate that sensation easily, and if they like proprioception and it helps them, then they will also get lots of heavy work to their muscles and joints through jumping on the trampoline. However, if you have a child who becomes hyper from movement, the more movement they get, the more hyper they become. A trampoline will therefore not be as suitable because it could bring them up even more, making them more excitable. So to bring the excitement back down, do some heavy muscle work, as proprioception is really good at regulating the vestibular system. Try to incorporate movement every 45 minutes at least throughout a child's daily routine, for example taking a short walk. If you are going to do any sit-down activities with a child, it's probably worth doing some movement beforehand. Children could also try sitting on a therapy ball, which can improve posture, for example when playing on a computer game. However, we should also be mindful that if you have really poor core stability, then sitting on a ball of air is not going to work as well when you are trying to complete an activity such as handwriting. The concept of time is also quite difficult for some children, so if you give them a boundary, for example, we are going to sit and work for 10 minutes, then we will get up and move for 5 minutes, before sitting back down for 10 minutes. If the child knows the routine and what is going to happen and when, then they can cope with it much better. Not many children are over-responsive to movement, but if they are, then this can have a significant impact upon their function. For example, a child will find it extremely difficult to just turn their head to look at you. Instead, they will turn their whole body. When they bend down, they do so slowly as they don't want to move their head too rapidly, as they become quite scared. These children will avoid movement. They won't go on swings in the park or climb on climbing frames because they are so frightened of the movement. You may observe them hesitate or avoid walking downstairs, become dizzy very easily, get car sick on trips, and don't like being lifted or engage in rough and tumble play. Some children are genuinely frightened because they know they can't save themselves if they fall, because their arms or legs are so bendy, and they have difficulties with their coordination. Children with these needs will benefit from a supportive seat that will not tip and supports the feet to be positioned flat on the ground. They will also benefit from firm, grounding touch and more grounding activities. Reinforce their body awareness and consider using a weighted backpack to provide more sensory input. Use strategies that provide lots of deep pressure to calm. Provide reassurance and support to build up their tolerance of movement, which can be quite difficult for them. Children may also have difficulties with eye movements, which is linked to the vestibular sense. Some children can't track objects, so they have to use their finger to help track the words when they are reading. Copying from the whiteboard can also be difficult. They have to really concentrate to be able to throw or catch a ball, as they can't track the ball. With the visual system, some individuals may have discrimination difficulties. For example, they find it hard to find puzzle pieces and can struggle to judge distances between two objects. An individual's spatial awareness might be affected, which in turn will affect their coordination. It can affect their play skills, for example trying to build Lego and they can't line the pieces up properly. As children become older, discrimination difficulties can be recognised through activities such as handwriting. To help support with these difficulties, you could try activities such as tracking games, bubbles, computer games, spot the difference, word searches, and dot to dot. Use large print books or activity sheets. Instead of asking the child to copy from the board, provide them with a printout from the whiteboard so they don't have to keep looking up and down to copy the work, which can be quite difficult. A typoscope, a piece of card with a window in it, can be used to help with reading, so that the child only has to concentrate on one section of writing rather than a whole page, which can be too much information. An angled board also provides a sloped work surface, which means the eyes don't have as far to travel to look at the page. Also consider the use of contrasting colours to make it easier to discriminate the visual information. Children who are visually over-responsive can easily pick out something in a very busy background, and they can also see detail that others don't notice. A lot of individuals who are neuroatypical are really good at computer algorithms and electronics and engineering, because you have to see patterns in great detail. Indeed, we now talk about the strengths of people, and their visual memory in detail is often very good. However, individuals can also experience sensitivity with the extra perception. They see in bits quite often, rather than seeing something as a whole. For example, they may see bits of a face because they see it in so much detail. So they will just see the hair, eyes, nose, rather than piecing it all together to see as a whole. This can also cause them to struggle with facial expressions. They can struggle with eye contact and how long they are supposed to have eye contact with others for. For example, they may be told to look at me when I'm talking to you, but when they look at you, they look at your eyes and end up staring at people. They may be so busy looking at the pupil in your eye getting bigger and smaller and observing the eye in great detail that they are not aware that someone is talking to them because they are so busy looking at all the things that are going on in your eye. An individual's anxiety may also increase due to the sensitivity. They may complain of headaches and rub their eyes or squint. They may cover their eyes when the fluorescent lights are switched on. In some environments, such as schools, you might see bright visual displays which can be distracting to the child, resulting in them not listening to the teacher. Keep visual distractions to a minimum. Get the child to focus their vision before giving an instruction. For example, look at my finger and then you can listen to me. Visual information can also be so overwhelming that your child might need to wear sunglasses when they are out and about. Some older children and even adults may choose to grow their hair long to help screen out bright lights. Children can't always articulate their needs, so parents and teachers will need to be mindful of the environment for the child. Some children can be super sensitive to taste and or smell. Our sense of smell goes in through the nostrils and straight to our olfactory bulb, into our emotional part of the brain. This is important to know because some children may have experienced a lot of trauma in their early years, and if they smell a certain smell, it can take them back to past events. Memories are quickly triggered by a smell, and smell is also hugely linked to taste. If we have a cold, we can't smell or taste, so if you are sensitive to smell, you will be sensitive to taste. Some children will eat a limited range of food and will avoid food that most children of their age enjoy. Some children really like beige food. Beige food is quite safe. It doesn't smell and it doesn't have a lot of bright patterns or colours. Lots of children who have sensitivity to smell will quite happily tell you that something smells. Others can crave or get upset by certain tastes and or smells, and don't appear to get used to the smell. They can be so distracted by a smell they can't refocus on activity. Some children can become nauseated or gag at a smell that others are only mildly affected by. To help with sensitivity to smell, consider using a handkerchief to cover the nose, which will dampen down the smell, or spray something they like onto the handkerchief or into the air around them. This can help to block out the smell they don't like. Scent oils or sprays can also be used. This diagram shows the calm alert window in relation to the processing of taste and smell, and how a person may present if over-aroused, under-aroused, or in that just right calm alert window. The strategies we have discussed should hopefully prepare a child for experiences that involve their taste and smell, but remember to take a graded approach to avoid the child becoming overwhelmed and disengaged. In terms of sensory advice for nursery, consider some of the following strategies to try. Redirect the child to carry out some of the heavy work activities to calm their overly alert sensory systems. Implement regular short breaks. Use a defined spot for them to sit to help reduce distractions. Consider the use of a fidget box with sensory tools that they can use to help facilitate their concentration. For example, squeezy and stretchy toys. Use of a sports bottle. Sucking on this or using a straw can provide oral motor input which can help them to self-regulate and concentrate. Not all children will need to see an occupational therapist. However, if there are concerns that a child may have difficulties with their fine and or gross motor skills, their coordination, or they have difficulty with activities of daily living such as washing or dressing that they should be expected to do for their age, they may have significant anxieties around certain situations that you think could be related to sensory processing difficulties, then do consider a referral to occupational therapy. This can be done by contacting your child's nursery or school or your GP. Prior to any referral, please consider strategies that could be used and activity and environmental adaptations that can be made. On the following slide, we have suggestions of some websites you may find useful. Please note, we cannot verify the accuracy of their information and do not necessarily endorse the products, theories and advice from these providers. We strongly advise that you consult your appropriate involved specialist or professional when considering any intervention or support strategies. The National Autistic Society has a wealth of reliable information, advice and support strategies available on their website. Autism West Midlands is a regional charity which offers support and advice along with organising activities and events for individuals with autism and their carers. Cerebra offers advice and support with sleep. RISE offers services to support the emotional well-being and mental health of children and young people in Coventry and Warwickshire. Ambitious About Autism is a national charity which offers support and raises awareness of autism. You can also search for the CWPT page on Facebook, where you will find informative and supportive advice. Thank you for listening to our online presentation.